Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Celtic Way YouTube channel, Twitter account, and Facebook page. It is Wednesday, the 22nd of November, and you join us for Celtic's morning briefing. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Tony Haggerty at Haggerty10 on the X handle. Tony, how are you doing this morning?
Very well, yourself, sir?
Yeah, things are good. It's getting ever so closer to the return of some people would say, the real football, but the domestic football's on its way back. Is that what, 3 sleeps now?
Until 3 sleeps, I believe, yes,
three
indeed.
Sleeps, the proper football is back, so we're all looking forward to that. We'll get plenty to discuss today, some of the news that's been breaking over the last 24 hours or so, as well as maybe a look ahead to the game at the weekend. But before we get started, once again, I'd like to thank our sponsors, the MPH Group and Navien Boilers, for sponsoring this video. The video is brought to you by MPH Group, which are Scotland's award-winning family-run all-trade specialists covering all of mainland Scotland. Winter's rolling in, and if you're thinking of giving your home heating system a boost, then MPH have an enticing Navien Boiler Winter Promotion just for you. When you opt for a Navien boiler through MPH Boilers, not only are you choosing top-tier efficiency, but you're also getting a free Navien Internet Controller. This little gadget can crank up your boiler's efficiency to an impressive 98%. And the cherry on top, they're covering the first year service, no added costs. And if you're wondering why Navien, they're gunning for Product of the Year, the H&V News Awards, the Oscars of the heated world. And to top it all off, the Navien ON range comes with an up to 12 years parts and labour warranty. That's some serious peace of mind right there. A big shout out to MPH as well, as they are nominated for the Small Company of the Year at the same awards. Excellence recognises excellence. MPH even offers flexible finance options, so gear up for the chill and consider making a smart move with MPH and Navien. All the links are in the description to their social media and their contact details. For plumbing, heating, kitchens and bathrooms, look no further than MPH Group, and we thank them for sponsoring today's video. So Tony, just going back into just everything with regard to Celtic, I think there was comments that have been made in the past, but I think they were resurfacing last night. They seemed to resurface last night regarding Celtic's defender Yuki Kobayashi. He hasn't played a... No, he's not the only one to not have played a competitive minute. Well, there have been players that have signed this season that haven't played a competitive minute, but with regard to his comments, I will just bring them up. Brendan Rodgers, I think he didn't hide the fact that maybe his future lies elsewhere rather than at Celtic. He was Ange Postecoglou was a fan of the player, but Brendan Rodgers said last month that there will be players who will be here for 6 months and won't have played. It's no fault of them. The squad is a lot bigger than I would have wanted. I think that there'll be more players who will look to go out and get game time. After the last window shut, it was a case of speaking to some of the players that didn't get out. I said, let's see how we go over the next 6 months. If it doesn't work out with game time, then of course we'll look at it in January. Some of those players have had game time and will be happy, while others will feel like they've wanted to play. Yeah, those aren't the exact quotes that Brendan Rodgers made about Yuki Kobayashi. I will find them out once I get your opinion on just those comments in general. But just as a holistic view, looking at the squad, looking at the way the squad is, do you think it is too big at the moment and Brendan Rodgers needs to trim off some of the, not the unwanted players, but players that just aren't getting game time at this moment in time?
He's signposting it, isn't he, for those guys? He's more or less saying, look, writing's on the wall here. And I think those public comments will have been made privately to those players who he was specifically talking about. And I think Yuki Kobayashi certainly falls into that category, doesn't he? You just don't see how Yuki Kobayashi is going to get any game time, does he? Through no fault of his own. Liam Scales has come in and the whole Cinderella story surrounding Liam Scales. Cameron Carter-Vickers is there. You know, there's Mike Nabrowski and Gustav Lagerbielke who can't get any game time at the minute themselves or are struggling. So Yuki Kobayashi is well down that pecking order, isn't he? So you have to say he will either leave the club permanently or he'll certainly, I think Celtic will try and fix up some kind of loan deal for him. And I think it's a bit of a shame because Kobayashi came in at first and I think he played the second half of the cup game against Hearts and Celtic won 3-0. Mm-hmm. And he looked very accomplished, he looked very good with the ball at his feet. And I think his kind of Celtic career got tainted with the 3-0 Ibrox game, didn't it? When he was kind of bullied a bit, certainly for one of the goals. I think it was by John Souttar, wasn't it? The header?
The header.
Yeah, and I think, you know, these impressions kind of stick, don't they? So from then on, he was behind the 8 ball I think you'll find in terms of his Celtic career, and I don't think he fully recovered from that, to be honest. Because the next couple of times he did get game time, he was tentative, wasn't he? And he looked unsteady and not as assured as he was that day he stepped on the pitch at Tynecastle that second half and looked very calm. So I think it would probably serve both parties well if he found a loan deal or even found a permanent transfer away. And I think that's certainly what Brendan Rodgers is alluding to, because he wants to trim that squad to, he's got, what is it, 32 he's got, is that right? Or
It's a high number, I know that.
And it's a high number, yeah, and I think he said ideally he wanted 25, didn't he? And I think if you're Yuki Kobayashi, you might actually want a permanent deal as well.
Yeah.
Just to get your future sorted rather than have that uncertainty again in 6 months and coming back and not, surplus to requirements. I don't think any footballer wants to feel surplus to requirements in any big team. And, so it's unfortunate. Ange Postecoglou certainly liked him, thought he could do a job, but Ange Postecoglou left, and guys like Kobayashi and Ideguchi are in a bit of limbo just now, aren't they, in terms of their Celtic futures? But you have to say, looking at it, probably both players' futures lie away from Celtic Park, but they won't be alone, Ryan, in that, will they?
No, absolutely not, and that's the reason why he wants to trim down that squad, because there are players in the team that are just not getting any game time whatsoever. That's not benefiting the player or the team. They're not contributing. If they're not contributing whatsoever, they're just and if they're not even making the bench, then individually it's not good for the player's career, because their value will drop, and in turn, then Celtic won't get a better fee for the player if other teams come in for their services. Yuki Kobayashi isn't the only one, as I stressed at the beginning of the video. There's players that were signed in the summer that haven't even made those appearances yet. You look at Kwon as well. I think he might be in a similar boat, although he did pull off a good result a couple of days ago against France's under-21s, I believe. I think he was part of the team, the South Korea team that won 3-0 against France. So that was a bit of a coup for him in that regard. So, yeah, with Kobayashi, the thing that I would say, he's in an unfortunate position because he's got no game time at centre-back, but there's better players than Kobayashi who aren't getting games at centre-back either. You look at Lagerbielke, you look at Nawrowski. If those guys aren't getting game time, then I really don't know where the minutes are supposed to come for Kobayashi. I'm just going to bring up those comments that Rodgers made. So he said, in fairness to Yuki Kobayashi, he would have gone out on loan and he got injured just before he went out. He's training well. It's not that he's doing anything wrong. His attitude's been fantastic. He's working hard. But we've a limited number of centre halves that we can play. And those were those exact quotes to Kobayashi before going on to sort of talking about trimming the squad, etc. It's very much the sort of language that I was worried about with regard to Brendan Rodgers talking about Effie Ambrose in his first spell at the club. He's doing well. He's a consummate professional. I was worried with O's situation when he started talking about that with him. It's good that he's got a bit of a run in the past few months. So with Kobayashi, it looks as if very much that he's not going to be playing a massive part at Celtic.
It smacks of the dreaded vote of confidence when a manager's having a bad sequence of results, doesn't it? And the board come out and say, no, we're firmly behind the manager, one more loss and they're gone. I think Brendan Rodgers was kind of saying that about Kobayashi there, wasn't he? That yes, he's playing, he's training very hard and he's working very well, but ... subtext is, it's not going to happen here, is it? I mean, let's be honest. So, but again, I stress, I don't think he's alone, and I think other players fall into that category. I mentioned Ideguchi. And I'll say this as well. My thoughts on Mikey Johnston. Mikey Johnston himself said if he can't force his way into the side by January, then he's hitting a crossroads in his career. So I believe that to be true. You look at the likes of Stephen Welsh as well, and also James McCarthy. I mean, there's some decision has to be made on that at some point. I don't actually know when his contract runs out, but you'd have to think that at some point that James McCarthy and Celtic will sever ties with each other, won't they? At it's probably long overdue, and I don't see that as a slight on James McCarthy's ability. It's just not happened. It's been unfortunate. Just hasn't been able to command any regular first team football in all the time that he's been there. And I think it is time to shake hands and everybody move on. You mentioned Kwon as well. I think Kwon needs to go out on loan to get some confidence back and play some football, basically. So, excuse me. Stephen Welsh is a tricky one because I like Welsh. I think he's got a lot to offer. But you mentioned it there. There just are better players in front of him, aren't there? And you find it hard to see where Stephen Welsh is going to get game time. But I'm perfectly happy with Stephen Welsh going to a Hibs or an Aberdeen, like Ryan Christie or Scales. So
could be the making of him.
Yeah. Something like that. If that could be arranged, and he's also a homegrown player, and he satisfies that quota for Champions League purposes, which you can't forget. But yeah, I mean, I think you feel sorry for Welsh as well. He's just victim of circumstance at Celtic because he is decent, but Celtic have got a plethora of defenders now. You can also see Nat Phillips returning to Liverpool, can't you?
Yeah.
I think he was brought in.
I think it's just hard.
Emergency cover just in case, Celtic really need it. So I think that loan will be recalled. So there's a whole plethora of players. And then there's the curious case we spoke about the other day of Marco Tilio. And we wait to see if Marco Tilio will not only kick a ball for Celtic, but kick a ball for somebody in the January window. Because he needs game time, he needs minutes, whether that be Celtic or he's proven himself enough to start making the bench of some Celtic squads. We wait with with bated breath on that one to see what actually happens. But yeah, I think there's a whole load of decisions that Brendan Rodgers needs to make, and Celtic need to make, obviously. But I think these are conversations that, since Brendan Rodgers addressed them in those press conferences, that have been ongoing, and you'll obviously find out a lot more in the coming weeks when Celtic will be doing business in January, both out the exit door and in the entrance door. So I think there'll be a lot of to and froing at Celtic Park during the January window.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it'll be more outs than in, to be honest with you. Maybe a couple of dashes of quality, a couple of players that you can we'll say will improve the team holistically. But I think the January transfer window is a good opportunity to sort of clear the decks of some players. Maybe clear the decks that should have been done in August, September, but for whatever reason, there was injury issues, there was different factors going against some players, but now there's probably a better view. Brendan Rodgers has been back at the club for 4 or 5 months now. He knows the landscape of the club. He knows how the players have dealt with pressure situations, both in Europe and domestically. He knows who his players are going to be for the future, basically, and the players that maybe won't play as big a part. And I think that's important as well. There's guys that maybe could have.
I also think that it's good communication from Rodgers to let the fans know that long in advance, so that we don't get to January and there is this kind of, I wouldn't say mass exodus, but I think Celtic supporters, you wish players well. You don't wish them to fail at the club, but there are players there who you just know are not going to cut it. They're not going to get any game time. And I said it, and I wrote a piece when Brendan Rodgers came back. It's a different Brendan Rodgers now. He has to be ruthless. And in January, he's going to have to be as ruthless as possible. You could see about 6 or 7 leaving and maybe 1 or 2 coming in. But the 1 or 2 that are coming in, I think, are the quality that he's craved. I think maybe, he could be as high as, 6 or 7 leaving and 2 coming in, something like that. But there'll be 2 good ones, and
hope so.
Difference makers, and I'm pretty convince of that. If that doesn't happen, then you answer questions, don't you? Because the manager himself, when he was asked that the January window was difficult, said, well, not necessarily. So that to me was like he's getting these ducks in a row, and they've already sounded out people to come to the club in January already. So I trust the manager on that one. Do you trust the board to back the manager and fund that? You're not so sure, are you? But I'm fingers crossed on that one, Ryan. I think the manager's kind of like Ange Postecoglou before him. He's kind of telling you bit by bit, sort of drip feeding, snippets of information. And again, I'll go back to, I always say you need to listen carefully to what the manager's saying. You've quoted him there a couple of times, a couple of things he said in presser. So you need to listen intently and work it out. I won't say the coded messages, but what he's actually saying. So I think he was telling you there's a plethora of players that won't be here in January. You can maybe work it out from that, or from what you're seeing, and guys that are just not getting game time, and work out the fact that if he's telling you that January's not so difficult, then that to me smacks of he's got a couple of people in mind. So here's hoping that all comes to fruition, because he's going to need a couple of players, because there's players away in Asian Cup duty in January. So I think that's in my expression, that is hurtling towards you like the bogey going down a hill with no brakes, Ryan. And Celtic need to do something about that.
Yeah, I'm just bringing up Patrick McLaughlin's comment. Is Kyogo actually guaranteed to get called up for the Asia Cup, though? It is an interesting point, because he has been in and out of squads. You would assume a player like Kyogo would get called up for Japan, but Japan are a pretty good side. They showed that, and they showed that probably around this time last year when they were in the World Cup. Their performances, their performance against Germany in particular, was something to behold for sure. They're a developing team, you'd say they're an emerging team on the stage of world football, and they look as if they're going to be a well-drilled force for years to come. They've always been technically good, but I think they've got a bit more about them now, especially with players plying their trade, and more so in Europe. They're really pushing the boat out there in the Bundesliga, the Scottish Premiership, the English Premier League with Matoma as well. So yeah, it's a really, really congested squad for Japan as well, and it'll be interesting to see if Kyogo does make the cut. Same for Maeda, because I know he's injured just now, but when he comes back, you would assume he'd be a lock to go into that Japan team.
Well, Moriyasu spoke recently, didn't he? Hajime Moriyasu spoke about the two of them withdrawing from the squads, and he said that they were both kind of heartbroken to be out of the squad. So, and I think he was just sort of saying, there'll be plenty of games in the future. So I thought he was talking about the Asian Cup. So I'm fully expecting the two of them to be included in Hajime Moriyasu's squad, to be fair, for the Asian Cup. I'd be very surprised if they weren't. But again, if you're going to be selfish about it in terms of your club football, you'd be absolutely delighted if they weren't, because Celtic have got some important games round about then, and you don't want to really lose both of them for a month. Should Japan go far, and they probably will go far in the tournament. So, but that's just being selfish, isn't it? I think it was the last manager said every player wants to represent their country because it's the biggest honour they can get. So I don't grudge players going away on international duty, and I'm preparing myself for the fact, Ryan, that both of those players will be called up. I've never really thought anything different until you said there that neither nor or both wouldn't be selected. So I'd be very surprised if Moriyasu didn't call both of them up for that tournament, a tournament of that magnitude and importance to a country like Japan.
Yeah, absolutely. The Asia Cup's basically their European Championships. It just so happens that it plays at that time of year, similar to the African Cup of Nations playing.
Yeah.
And that, when people moan about that every year when it happens, like they wouldn't moan if it was a European competition, or maybe they would. I don't know. That people would like to moan for moaning's sake. I think it's do you know, it's quite a funny one because, you know, O's the number 2 striker. Everybody knows that O is the backup striker. He's trying his hardest to break into that first team, and he has had a couple of games to really show himself. And in the last game against Aberdeen, he certainly did with those 2 goals, coming off the bench and scoring 2 goals. But it's quite funny because there's more of a chance of O getting called up for South Korea than Kyogo is for Japan, I would say. It seems as if it's between O and Chogi Sung, the Michelin striker who was formerly linked with Celtic, who are fighting it out for that up front spot. I know Heung-min Son's been playing up front for Tottenham recently, but he seems to play on the wing still for South Korea. But there's more of a chance of O getting called up for South Korea than there is for Kyogo getting called up for Japan. It's quite an interesting dynamic, that, isn't it?
I think you're sending out the take O vibe and leave Kyogo. Is that what you're doing?
I don't want either of them to go, to be honest. That's just a selfish move.
Playing some kind of Jedi mind trick in both the international managers. But yeah, I think you'll find that O will go too. Actually, I resigned myself to the fact that the 3 of them are going to go, Kyogo, Maeda and O. And, 4 of them actually, Hatate as well. So we've been thinking about that for a year now, because we first spoke about it, we addressed it last year. Sean was the first one to bring it up, Sean Martin. So it's nothing in my thoughts have changed in terms of that. So I think if you not so much prepare for the worst, but these guys want to go to these tournaments and represent their country. So you have to say, as you say, it's their equivalent of their European Championship. So they want to go and represent their country. Yeah, it's bad news for Celtic in that sense, but Celtic have known about this for a long time, so they have to be prepared for it, Ryan, whatever eventuality does come their way. But I think O's a certainty to be called up as well. There's just something about O that's coming together nicely, isn't there?
And, yeah, Klinsmann seems to rate him as well, really, really highly, which is good.
Get more game time, and the most surreal thing I think I've ever seen is Klinsmann at Rugby Park. That time to see O is just a strange, surreal kind of. But fair play to Klinsmann for coming over to see him and and running the rule over him, and he'll be pleased recently with O's contribution, and I'm sure he'll be taking note of that. The 2 goals against Aberdeen, the winner against St Mirren, all that kind of thing. So I think O certainly will be away with Korea, and Klinsmann kind of likes him, doesn't he? So yeah. I think he's got a soft spot for him. So I certainly think he'll take him. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's time we address the other elephant in the room with regards to what's going on today. Just quickly before we finish off today's morning briefing, Celtic's AGM is going on today at around about 11:30 till 1:30. As the elephant in the room, we need to talk about everything that's going on with Celtic. It's sure to be an interesting couple of hours, I would say. Tony, what are you expecting from this today? When it comes to I think the re-elections are a bit of a formality with the directors of the club, but what are you expecting just in general with the AGM? It could be anything, couldn't it?
Yeah, I know they're a formality, but part of me wishes they weren't a formality.
I know.
Who's the kind of new blood, new guys to come in with innovative ideas and stuff like that, but that's just me personally. But the kind of re-election of members' businesses just usually a rubber stamp job. As for what's going to be said, or no questions from the floor, my goodness, there is a broad spectrum
could be
there.
Anything.
It
could be absolutely anything.
And I'm not a shareholder. I don't think you're a shareholder either, Ryan. But I would love to actually be a shareholder and be present at that today, because I think it could be a feisty one. I would imagine there will be questions on the club stance with the Green Brigade. I think that would be.
I think that's going to dominate proceedings, I'll be honest.
And the kind of the internal strife and that's been happening with that, and someone from the club is there. and they will be on record, and they'll have to, they'll have to talk smart, I would imagine, and let people know. And again, you read between the lines with all of these answers, don't you? And you take what you want from it, but it's always a mixed bag every year, isn't it? With the questions from shareholders, and I just like, I like to hear people like Michael Nicholson speak at these kind of events, because this is their stage, it's their floor. That's the only time I like to hear the likes of Michael Nicholson and these cronies speak. Because I think if you're not hearing them any other time, then it's ticking along rather nicely, isn't it? So, but I also would like someone to ask whether they will back the manager in the January transfer window. I think that's imperative. And I would also like them possibly to ask about the summer transfer window in terms of preparing Celtic for the Champions League. Do they feel that Celtic were adequately prepared to go into a tournament of that magnitude with the team that they had, and bearing in mind the position that they are in the group? Questions like that, because you have to ask difficult questions, Ryan. That's the whole point of them addressing the Celtic supporters. They can't all just be smoke and mirrors and tell you we've got lots of money at the club, but we are reluctant to spend it. They're going to have to be asked, when's that money going to be, or some of it, or a portion or a chunk, going to be reinvested in the team and the manager? Because I would trust the manager to spend it wisely.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's no getting away from that. That the guys that are sitting at the top table with Brendan Rodgers apart, let the manager down a wee bit going into the Champions League, and not for the first time. Celtic have a checkered history of this, and if you want that manager to remain in situ, then I think January's a big important window for all those people at the top table and the manager concerned. I just don't want the Green Brigade issue to turn into a circus. There's a real chance of that happening, but I want straight answers about the Green Brigade and the kind of the stance that's been taken with regards to the Green Brigade just now. So hopefully we can get to the bottom of that, and we can also get a resolution to that, an amicable resolution, which I wrote about when the issue reared its head recently. So, but I think that's the kind of questions I'd be asking, Ryan, if I was in that room.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with absolutely everything that you've said there. It's very, very important that this doesn't become more of a sideshow than it already is.
Yeah.
Because you're going into games at home, and I know, Tony, you've not been to any of the home games since the Green Brigade were suspended or their tickets were withheld or whatever. It is a sideshow, what's going on with regard to the Green Brigade and the club, and it's taken away from what matters most, which is the football on the park. And thankfully it hasn't affected Celtic with regard to results, but there's every chance that a game could. They do generate a lot of the atmosphere, and you've got to look at both sides. There has been problems, but at the same time, that atmosphere is very, very difficult to generate otherwise. And you've seen a knock-on effect with regard to the Green Brigade getting their sanctions, and then the boys standing in solidarity. All of a sudden, there's not really a lot of noise at Celtic Park, unfortunately. And see, when it starts to affect performances, I think that's when the other fans will start to get annoyed with the whole situation. There is no right or wrong answer with this. I feel everybody's got an opinion on it, but you don't want it to become more of a sideshow than it already is. And I think Celtic have an opportunity today to notify the fans that are present, both the fans that are present and the wider fans that will be tuning in and reading stories when they drop, about what the situation is and what they're doing to alleviate that problem that's currently going on.
I think we've got a real chance to address it, Ryan, and potentially put it to bed and not make it bigger than it actually is. And also, I get back to it that it does need sorted, but who's the team that suffered the most when they played behind closed doors? Right? You want to take a massive part of that, away from Celtic games right now. And, politics aside, with the Green Brigade, you're talking about atmosphere alone. They're wonderful. They create a wonderful spectacle, and they create a lot of noise, and the players respond to that, right? The politics argument's a different issue altogether. That's something that grown men will need to get round the table and thrash out between them, and I hope they can do that. But you're talking about atmosphere and the colour and the spectacle and the noise that the Green Brigade bring. They are second to none, and I think everybody, and the boys as well, I think everybody can recognise that. So it's time to just knock heads together and say, look, let's be adult, let's be grown up about this, and get it resolved, because you don't want anything detracting from the product on the park, because Celtic are starting to motor under Brendan Rodgers. Some really good performances. Ibrox, Kilmarnock at home, Hearts away, Aberdeen at home. So you don't want anything to detract from the momentum that you're building. So yeah, I think that's what we want today. So, and hopefully everybody can move on, and you can look forward to some scintillating football in Celtic, hopefully making it 3 in a row come May.
Yeah, fingers crossed. And, it'd be a great return for Brendan Rodgers to bring another trophy back to what is already an impressive trophy haul in his Celtic career. If he can get two, then even better. I'm not going to downplay a double. A double would be a great achievement, especially for a guy coming back. To a squad that he hardly knows. A lot of these players he's either signed or he's inherited from previous managers. So, yeah, let's hope that he can do that, and let's hope that the AGM goes as smoothly as it can. There'll be a couple of, I don't know, a couple of questions that may raise some eyebrows, as they always do. There's always seems to be one or two questions you're like, you can't believe somebody's asking that. But I think that just shows you the wider stretch of the Celtic support. There's so many different opinions and so many different views, and you've got to validate and appreciate every single one of them, whether or not you agree with it. And the EGM is a good place to air those views, because they certainly get broadcast to the public after they're said. So yeah, I'm just hoping it's smooth enough today. A couple of questions are answered with regard to recruitment, with regard to the Green Brigade, and other issues surrounding that. And yeah, it's always refreshing to hear maybe it isn't always refreshing to hear what the top of the table says, but it's a good indication of where things are.
It's their platform, Ryan. They have it every year, and they have to come up with the right answers. Basically, there's many questions, so we shall see what transpires from it today. But yeah, I mean, I think that's on my questioning wish list. If I was there, I don't know what other shareholders will be on their mind in terms of what they ask the men at the top table. But it's up to them, really, isn't it? Because it's both the men at the top table's floor and the shareholders' floor to bring up whatever issues they want. But I think I think you've got to have meaningful discussion, haven't you?
Yeah,
about issues, meaningful, and I mean really meaningful, and
it's all about the balance that they strike today.
Yeah, resolutions to problems. Moving forward, you want to try and alleviate that, don't you? And give Celtic and the manager and the players the best chance to defend their title moving forward. You don't want any, as I say, sideshows or circuses to detract from ultimately what everybody wants: a successful Celtic football team on the park and winning trophies. That's bottom line, isn't it?
That's the one thing that's consistent from the boardroom to the fans in the stadium. They all want a successful Celtic, because at the end of the day, if Celtic are doing well, then the fans will be happy, the board will be happy because business is booming. So if everybody can get on a united front, sort all the differences that are happening over the past couple of weeks and months, then if everyone's pulling in the same direction, it can only mean good things for the club going forward. That's has been going for about 35 minutes. It's a bit of a shorter one today because we're still sort of going from the international break back to the domestic stuff, and there's not as much news as potentially you would talk about on a normal week, so we'll probably just leave it at that. But I think we'll have more to talk about tomorrow. I know it's your day off tomorrow, Tony, so I need to bring somebody else on to talk about everything with regard to the AGM, maybe some of the comments that are made, comments from the manager, because he's got a press conference today. But we really do appreciate everybody joining us for today's morning briefing. As always, we'd like to thank MPH Group, who are Scotland's award-winning family-run all-trade specialists covering all of mainland Scotland. They're gunning for Product of the Year at the H&V News Awards. They're also nominated for Small Company of the Year at the same awards. When you opt for a Navien Boiler installation through MPH Boilers, not only are you choosing top-tier efficiency, but you're also getting a free Navien Internet Controller, which can crank up your boiler's efficiency to an impressive 98%, and they're covering the first year's service, no added costs. We thank MPH Group for their sponsorship once again. For plumbing, heating, kitchens and bathroom work, please check out MPH Group. And yeah, I'm going to say it for the third time in a minute. Thanks once again to them for sponsoring our videos and Navien too. Before we finish off, if you please subscribe to the Celtic Way website, £4 for 4 months or £18 for a year, you'll be supporting top quality football journalism covering the club you love. Tony's pointing it out. Thank you very much. If you visit www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe, on there this morning there is a piece from myself talking about Lewis Palmer. I know yesterday you put out a piece talking about the potential return of Jota. I think I've maybe done a 180 on that, just ever so slightly. It's the different views in the Celtic Way. We're talking about the different views from the boardroom to the support, but there's different views even among Celtic supporters and Celtic journalists as well. Tony yesterday was writing about how Jota would be a dream scenario coming back to the club that he left only 6 months prior, but I was talking about how good Lewis Palmer has been recently for both club and country. Unfortunately, his team got knocked out last night. His country, Honduras, on penalties last night. But Palmer was fit and he did play. So that bodes well for Celtic in the future. So I took stills from both his goals and assists from games against Atletico Madrid, Ross County, the Aberdeen game as well as the Honduras game against Mexico a couple of days ago. So all of that is available on the website. If you want to read a bit more about Lewis Palmer, who I believe is Celtic's star man at the moment, then please check out www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe. Please get subscribing. £4 for 4 months. We can't continue to do it without the support of our subscribers. If you are interested, please hit that subscribe button both on YouTube and on the website and get involved. Tony, thank you very much for joining me this morning.
Pleasure. Maybe see you later on. Is that right? After the press conference?
I think we might do a wee quick one after the press conferences as well. There'll be plenty to talk about, so that could be well worth doing. Thank you once again to everybody in the comments. I'm sorry we couldn't bring up as many comments as we would have liked, but we wanted to get this show kind of done quicker today because we've got stuff to do in other sectors of the website. But we thank everybody for their support. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow, as well as a wee show later on tonight to discuss the press conferences. But until then, have a very good day, and yeah, we'll see you later on. Cheers, guys.